Hey guys, I want to talk about execution today. So, most of us are transitioning from a build or potentially fitness phase into our race phase. And naturally, there is a shift in focus at this time of year as we build towards our first races of the season. And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to reiterate the point on execution and the value of execution in a training program, in any training program. It is absolutely critical. So the goal of training is to improve, and you can't improve if you're not executing the training sessions that you're doing. So as we've already established, the goal of training is not to accumulate fatigue and accumulate training hours. It's to improve. And the way we can improve is to ensure that we're executing training sessions adequately and appropriately. So to that point, it's not about going hard all the time. So nailing your training sessions is not about going hard every single training session, and that's not how you maximize the training hours that you're doing, the training time that you have available. It's actually marrying up the execution or your execution of any given training session with the intent of that training session. So easy session or endurance-based session needs to be done appropriately, and so too do your hard sessions, threshold, VO2, all the fancy words. They need to be done with intent and purpose. Similarly, if you are doing a hard session or some low RPM strength work on the bike, on the trainer, for example, and you've got a zone 1 spin at 90 RPM, do it properly. Do it with the appropriate execution and the appropriate intent. So that's not sitting up, having a drink, flicking through your phone and spinning for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever the length of the interval is. It's actually spinning at 90 RPM, still staying in zone 1. So it's obviously very far removed from the work of that particular session, but it's not just sit up, stop being engaged, not thinking about what you're doing. And further to that point, as a coach, I'd much rather someone average 70 minutes a day of training across a training week and execute really, really well, regardless of whether it's an easy session, a hard session, endurance session, a recovery session, than someone trying to accumulate 100 minutes a day, but their execution is not there. Like they're just going through the motions, they're setting the alarm, getting up and just rolling through the motions with the sole purpose is to finish the session and tick the box. So a little bit of a story for you. Historically, I'd done a lot of swimming. I'd swum in squads. I'd be swimming 3 to 4 times a week and getting up around 3 or 4 Ks. And one day a week, I would always try and get to 5 Ks. So yes, I'd do intervals and I'd have varied intensities and varied equipment use in there, but I wouldn't get out of the pool unless I'd swum 5 Ks. That was sort of the criteria. And then for a period of time, I forced myself to only swim 1,500 meters whenever I got in the water. Like that was my limit. And initially, I thought, I was getting fatigue, and I thought, it's just because my swimming's dropping off because I'm not swimming enough. But then I did some testing and some time trials just to check where I was at and just to break up the training a little bit. And I was performing really well. So what I realized was that fatigue that I was feeling through the shoulders and my arms and my back after these so-called short swims was because I was executing the sessions really well, because I really wanted to maximize the time, because I was forcing myself to do minimal amounts of training. So it's only a very small example. I could reel off hundreds of others from both me as an athlete, but also you guys, the athletes I've coached and worked with over time, and I can also see it amongst the community in general. But it does work, and I guess the point I want to make is don't chase more hours and more time and simply just tick boxes and accumulate training time or training hours or training Ks. Think about how you're executing the sessions and if you're executing them as per the intention of those sessions when they're written. And finally, a word on consistency. So we all talk about consistency. Generally, people agree that consistency is key, and I agree with that statement. I'm a big advocate for consistency, but I like to layer in another important factor, and that is the consistency of execution. So it's not just about not having any gaps or illness or breaks in your training. It's actually about consistently executing appropriately. So it's not having 10 hours a week for 15 weeks leading into a race. Yes, that is a form of consistency, but doing that 10 hours a week for 15 weeks leading into an event will be much more beneficial if the execution is there. So again, making sure you marry the execution of the session with the intent of the session. That's where true consistency comes from, and that's when you're going to yield the greatest results from the training. So we all spend a lot of time, invest a lot of time, effort, energy, money into this sport and into our health and fitness and our own personal journeys, and that's great. But if you're going to do something, do it properly, and that comes back to your executions every single day, every single session. Hope it helps. Get after it. Cheers.